Everybody, welcome back to the show. Can't wait to get into today's episode, which is going to be 2510, episode 2510. And this show is dedicated to all of the people out there, which is basically all of us, being inundated that the more fat and more animal-based protein you can eat, the better and healthier you will be. And the reason why I wanted to do this show is because I always keep things from a fair and unbiased perspective. I don't own stock in a meat delivery-based packaging plants, and I also don't own one in plant-based foods. What I want to share with you is actually what the science says, not just based on body transformation, but on longevity, and go back and just look at what are some of the indoctrination that we are being taught and led to believe that may or may not be true. So again, this is going to be so important because in just a few weeks from now, you're going to have a half a dozen to a dozen different diets being promoted to you that are the latest and greatest and absolute best thing in the world, and it's never been seen or done before, not in this way at least, and it's going to revolutionize your life. Hopefully by the end of the show, you will realize that you can achieve anything that you want to achieve, and hopefully you tuned into yesterday's show on that episode 2509, but it won't be through some, as they say, whiz-bang new marketing-based fad. It's just not going to happen. So what I want to share with you is this, is that the diet that's the most popular right now, and honestly, it's just a rehash of the same diets that are always around that help people transform their body. Okay, so let's look at it this way. How does a human being lose weight the fastest and I would just say not necessarily the healthiest, but it's not unhealthy. It's just not a great long-term plan. So what's the fastest diet plan to help someone lose weight? Is it all carbs? Is it all protein? Is it all fat? All right, well, let's take a look at it. The fastest way to help a human lose weight quickly is going to be a higher protein, moderate fat diet with very little carbs. All right, we've known this forever. Literally forever. And I share with you, and I share with you exactly why. So I want to go over this. And again, today is just going to be a rant of a podcast because I just want you to know what's actually true and what's going to help you get to your goals, but then also how to keep those, not just when you achieve a goal, but how to make the results last. Because it has to be able to stick. You have to be able to make this stick beyond just the next 12 weeks. All right, so we did the history of the low-carb diet. Let me see if I can find it right there, episode 2476. Okay, so I've said this before and I'll say it again. There is no diet that's going to help you lose weight faster than a lower carbohydrate diet. Yes, you can make it work on any diet. You can make it work on a high carb diet. You can make it work on a high fat diet. You can make it like anything. But if you take your carbs down, it works faster. It just does because your body's not going to retain as much water. It's just not. And you're going to be better able to stabilize your blood sugar levels right away. Okay. So should you be able to eat carbs and keep stable blood sugar? Yes, you should. But in the beginning, are you going to have to work back there? Yes, you probably will. So bodybuilders have known this forever. Athletes have known this forever. People trying to make weight for not only for an athletic event, but also I've worked with so many celebrities that they need to make their own weight. I'm using that in air quotes for a photo shoot or a red carpet appearance. It is not difficult to drop 5 to 10 pounds in a week with a lower carbohydrate diet, especially if it's mixed with something like a functional medicine detox, etc. But again, let me go over this, that this does work. Now, you can do low carb by doing high fats and then low protein, low carb. That would be considered a true keto-based diet. Is that the best for you? I don't know. Are we talking about medical-based or are we talking about it body transformation-based? Because I would argue it's not the best body transformation-based because you need to keep your protein up so that you are not muscle wasting. And again, there'll be a lot of people saying, well, you're burning specifically more ketones rather than glucose. And again, that's why I did a 2-part series on glucose because people are not understanding really the human physiology behind this as a lot of experts out there. If you're doing high intensity interval training, which a lot of these same people are, right? And you are doing sprints or you're doing anything that gets your heart rate elevated above, let's say 70% of max heart rate. And sometimes I say VO2, but your max exertion, right? You're going to be burning glucose. But like that is, you cannot get around that in any way, shape, or form. So much so that the human body has built into itself about 100 grams in the liver and another like 300 plus grams in your muscles. So that's so you don't run out of glucose. Because if you were to completely run out of glucose, you will die. Like that's what a lot of people miss, is that yes, your brain could burn ketones if it needs to, but you need to maintain blood sugar to not die. Like that is how it works. So you will never get away from being able to use glucose. So then I also say, well, once you know that, that means there's no need to totally eliminate carbs in your diet. They're not the enemy. They're not. It's just, it's like a Band-Aid approach that people use to go completely low carb all the time. Okay, so like, again, I'm not gonna go over all of this today. I can link up exactly what to do, how to do it. I've done it on previous shows. They're all free to listen to. I've got a free course on detox. That's at stevencabral.com/courses. Click on the one on detox. It's completely free. And it takes you through 21 days of a low carb diet. Works phenomenally well for most people. It will not work as well if you've been doing low carb consistently. And hopefully, you know, that part does make sense. But let's say you're going through the holidays, you haven't been low carb, you start on that January 2nd. All right, that Monday, great. So now you're good to go. So you get 21 days and you can go low carb and it's gonna work great and you should lose 5 to 10 pounds, really no problem, as long as you have 15 to 20 pounds to go, right? Okay. So again, I'm talking about this body transformation wise for the most part, because the truth is that it's not the best thing to do health wise. I can share with you in a moment. It's great and the best thing to do health wise, again, for 21 days, but then we need to start adding back in more carbohydrates. Typically from low glycemic fruit. If you've checked out my podcast on why sugar does not cause diabetes, again, natural sugar, you will see that eating blueberries and these types of things, not only do they not raise glucose, they actually are beneficial for blood sugar levels. I know it doesn't make sense at face value because what we've been taught, but I do break it down. I break down the science. I share with you exactly why this is the case. And we've known it for many, many years. Okay, so we've got a 21-day lower carb period of time. I agree with that. I use it in my functional medicine detox. I use it in my fat velocity program. I use it in the first 21-day elimination diet for anybody looking to lose weight. All right, so then that's done. Now we need to start easing carbs back in. The problem is this. And again, so you'll start to find your carbohydrate limit of like what works for you, and then you'll gradually be able to better adapt your cells, which takes time, again, 12 to 16 weeks to really begin to truly adapt to being able to eat healthy carbohydrates again. And it has to do with the actual lipids of your cell membranes, of how they allow glucose into the cells for energy, for fuel. And at the same time, you need to be burning fuel as well. So why don't I link up some shows, at least just a couple. We'll link up the history of a low carb diet. We'll link up 2504 on are you glycogen depleted, which most likely you're not. But then let's link up the one on specifically on glucose. So we'll find that for you. There it is right there. It's 2498. So all of these, I know it's a bunch of shows. I'm going to link them up today at episode 2510. All right, stevencabral.com/2510. Because if you've been struggling to figure out what the right diet is for you, how to lose weight, and then not just, because eventually you're going to reach your goal weight. Okay, so what do you do then, right? And then we'll link up a podcast called The Foundation of All Diets, and I'll link that up as well. What I want to refute today is this, and again, it's very frustrating for a lot of people in the natural health-based space that are not dogmatic about what diet you need to follow, is that people always used to say people are saying today that you need to eat more butter, you need to drink more milk, you need to eat more meat, and you need to eat more eggs. And they're saying that is where we've gone wrong with our overall health. And I have to share with you that that is not the case. Meaning, like, I have no problem with grass-fed butter or ghee. I have no problem with pastured eggs. And I have no problem with grass-fed beef, grass-finished, of course, pastured chicken, turkey, wild fish, any of those things. But let's leave fish out of the equation for a moment. And the proponents of this will say, well, if you go back to the early 1900s and maybe late 1800s, but we just don't have a lot of great data on that, but certainly early 1900s, people did not necessarily die from or have the heart disease, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes that there is today. I would argue that there was still a whole lot of cardiovascular issue, mainly, I would say, undiagnosed, I mean, if you think about it, over 100 years ago, we didn't have any of the technology that we have today or blood work that would be able to diagnose what we can diagnose today. So I think we have to leave that one out of the equation. But I do agree with the type 2 diabetes. I do agree with like the level of heart disease, all that. And again, I'm not blaming, so just to share with you here, not blaming the butter, eggs, and meat for the most part. Now, I've shared this before, that there are limits to those, and it's based on the individual. So those people with an apolipoprotein, or basically an apoprotein ApoE based allele, it's called a 4. Those with the double 4 are going to be most at risk for not being able to properly metabolize saturated fats and basically fats in general. Then if you have a 3-4 for a specific allele, which basically are proteins in your blood that are not able to process saturated fat, again, as well. So again, it's only 26% of the population. The double 4 allele is somewhere, they're pinning it down, but it's somewhere around 5 or 6%. Okay, so we've got about 5 or 6% that really don't do well, 26% total that don't do as well with high levels of saturated fat. It doesn't mean that they can't eat it, but they're just not as great at processing it. And it can lead to high cholesterol and inflammatory cholesterol in those specific individuals. Now, the reason why a lot of people will tell you that fat doesn't matter and the more fat, the better, and the more saturated fat is because if you do the math, then 74% do pretty much fine with it, right? So their heart-related issues may not be cholesterol-based until you get to a certain level. It can actually be cortisol, higher levels of calcium to magnesium, meaning lower level magnesium levels, and much more, like so many other factors. So I agree with that, right? But there's certainly a subset of the population, like 1 out of every 4, that doesn't do well with it. And all of those people are certainly forgot about. Now, here's the thing, though. People are saying that you can really eat unlimited levels of butter, meat, and eggs, and you'll be totally fine. This point, I disagree with as well. Again, I'm not saying that you can't eat some of those things, but they say the healthiest people eat lots of butter, meat, and eggs because those are the most nutrient-dense foods. Okay, so let's take a step back. In the history of the world, the people who ate the richest foods, right, most nutrient-dense meat, right, liver, organ meat, butter, eggs, were the wealthiest people, if we go back to ancient Rome, Greece, etc. They typically fared the worst. They had the most health-based issues. This is documented between all sorts of issues, gout, gouty arthritis, heart-based issues, and earlier death. And the people who had, now it can be total calories as well. I'm not saying that because they could be more overweight. They had the luxury of actually more calories. But the people who did more of the farm work, more of the work, ate more meagerly, ate, as they say, nose to tail, and didn't eat a lot of it, well, they typically live longer. Okay, so we say, okay, that's going back hundreds of years. We might have may not have as much data. Okay, I can agree with that. Again, we're trying to stay unbalanced here. So let's look at the world's longest lived population. Every single one of them ate some meat, fish, or dairy, or eggs, or animal-based protein. So again, that's why I'm saying, I don't think that there's an issue eating and that you need to be completely plant-based. Have never said that, right? So now we're looking at it. All right, how much do they eat? Well, again, as I go back, and I've done many podcasts on this, and I don't even know the podcast number, but maybe my amazing team is able to find it. Because I actually brought you through the diet of like most of the experts. Oh, I would love to be able to find this podcast. So we're going to do our best to find it for you and link it up at 2510. And I go through it step by step. And at the end of the day, like the top experts in the field, whether they are, paleo-based, plant-based, whatever it might be, like people who really are looking at this from an unbiased perspective, they're not just like an Instagram, celebrity expert doctor, etc., that they really like have a practice, that they're helping people. Because people who have a real health-based practice, they're not recommending ridiculous things. It's just people out there looking to sell books and whatever it might be. And again, that's fine. Like if that's what you want to do, it is, it is what it is. But the problem is it makes people more confused than ever. So at the end of the day, I looked at, okay, these are the top paleo books. This is the top these are the top practitioners. It was the difference between basically a handful of meat or fish a day. Right? That was literally it. Because when you look at the longest lived people, that is it. right? Like they were eating beans, they were eating lentils, they were eating either it was rice or they might be eating sourdough in this particular continent and culture. And they were eating vegetables. Some of them were fermented, some of them were not. They got in their omegas from different things. And again, at the end of the day, they were eating fermented fish or beef, or they were eating whatever it might be, but it was only about a handful, right? So we say, okay, like those are the longest lived people. And again, like that's not anecdotal, like that's well researched. So then you say, okay, now let's go to America, early 1900s. What were people eating? They say, well, they were eating a lot more beef, eggs, meat, etc. And I would say to you, to a degree, like only to a degree. If you're in your 40s and 50s and you can think about your grandparents and they grew up in the 20s, 30s, et cetera, when they were young and how they were eating today and carrying those traditions through, yeah, they might be sitting down and maybe having an egg or two for breakfast, okay? They might be adding a little pat of butter to that. Okay, so we'll give you that. Then what were they eating at lunch? Well, like a lot of them were eating sandwiches, to be honest. So like a lot of, if you think like, oh, they were eating just not a lot of calories, but you know, a sandwich or something like that. And then at dinner, yeah, they would sit down to a pork chop or a piece of beef or chicken or fish or whatever, a little bit of veggies, a little bit of starch, potatoes, whatever it might be. And that was their diet. And then it wasn't anything wild. It's not the healthiest it could be, but it was not a massive amount of beef, eggs, cheese, like all of these things like that, a little bit of cheese, things like that, yes. But people were not adding a stick of butter to their coffee, right? They were not waking up at any point and sitting down and having sausage and eggs and bacon and butter for breakfast. Then at lunch, a massive grass-fed burger or whatever it is. And then at dinner, you know, a sirloin, ribeye, whatever it might be with more butter on top. Like they were not going out of their way to eat that much meat or butter or whatever it might be. And so what I would say to you is this, because again, I want you to take it for what it's meant to be. And it's, you can absolutely transform your body and get in great shape with the eggs, sausage, bacon, butter breakfast, meat, burger, veggies, whatever at lunch, and then ribeye or so at night, right? Or just take 2 of those meals, right? Like maybe you're skipping breakfast, whatever it might be. And I get it and I understand because it will transform your body. You will most likely be leaner. You may be getting quite a bit of nutrients, but it's unlikely. And again, I hate to say it, but when you look at a lot of these so-called, again, experts in the space, a lot of them are on testosterone replacement therapy. But again, like TRT is like to get you to normal levels. We're talking about they were using and abusing steroids too. Now you can say that that caused cardiovascular issues, et cetera. Maybe, right? Because when you get to a certain level, there's thickening in the blood, there's all sorts of sedimentation, et cetera, happening. And then there's might be higher levels of cortisol. So I get it. I understand nothing exists in a vacuum. But if you think that you're going to live into your 80s and 90s on a meat-heavy, butter-heavy diet with less plant-based foods or none because you think that the carnivore diet is the end-all be-all, again, the only reason I'm speaking out against it is because it is one of the unhealthiest long-term things that you could do. And the people that are promoting it right now, unfortunately, are really not even following it. You're starting to see that more and more. They're saying, okay, yes, I recommend some organ meat, some meat, yes, but I'm also having it with Brussels sprouts or my vegetables or whatever it might be. And I'm using a little bit more olive oil now instead of just lard or tallow and butter, right? And yes, I'm starting to do more green shakes, even though I don't, necessarily do this. Oh, and these fruit are okay. Okay, and some honey or a little bit of, goat-based yogurt is okay as well. You have to understand is a lot of these people will literally cherry pick a couple of research studies that makes it seem irrefutable as to what they're talking about. And the issue I have is that so many people, we're not talking about a couple hundred, we're talking about tens of millions of people become hurt and confused in the process. Now, a lot of the people following it are 20, 30-year-old men and some women, no doubt about it. But there's a lot of people in their 50s and beyond that start to adopt this, which is even more dangerous. The older you are, the less balanced you are in your nutrition, the worse it's going to be. The higher level of prostaglandins. Now, As a practitioner, I can test all of these things and I can show people, and it's easy then for me to be able to convince them because again, I'm not trying to convince them of anything. I'm using research science plus their own personal biomarkers and data points to show them what the best diet is for them. And we've done this now with well over 250,000 people. It's over 300,000 now, but again, like I don't need to count every appointment that we do. And I try to give you all of the free information from what we see inside of our practice on the show. And I can tell you this, that any person that's really researching nutrition, I mean, if you just look at like David Sinclair, or you look at like anyone who's just really looking at longevity, it's mainly plant-based, some meat, some fish, some eggs, olive oil, avocado, like none of those things are an issue, especially more of the monounsaturated fats. Because, and then I teach this inside of IHP, you pull from the longest lived people. You already know what they've been doing for well over 100 years. And then you can look back at whether it's anecdotal or not, like how, again, like people lived many, many years ago. Yeah, they used intermittent fasting. They didn't overeat. And all of these things matter. And so what I don't want you to do is go into the new year thinking like, oh, I'm going to give carnivore a shot. There's no point. It's not a good idea. It's really not. Just if you want, include some meat, but get the vegetables, instead of going all saturated fat, there's no magic to saturated fat. I've broken it down inside and out. You need a certain amount of saturated fat, no doubt about it. It's great for your hormones, right? It's a precursor to what? Pregnenolone. Pregnenolone is a precursor to what? Every other hormone. Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, androstenedione, et cetera, right? Dihydroepiandrosterone. Again, like we know the hormonal pathway. It also provides specific lipids for your cell membranes, but you need some of the omega-3s as well. And so like what people don't tell you is that today, if you're even eating the same diet as we were 100 years ago, you're going to be so much worse off than 100 years ago when things were not conventionally farmed. At least back then, they were grass-fed animals. They were pastured animals. That means you got pastured milk and cheese, those types of things. You're not getting that today. So following the same ancestral diet, right, from 100 years ago, it's going to be disastrous for your health. Talk about the inflammatory levels of omega-6s and the specific prostaglandin series 2. These things are going to kill you in your 50s and 60s. And we see that. We see that with a lot of people following these diets and doing the whole, TRT, et cetera. And again, I don't have a problem with people doing this at a specific age and for a specific reason. What I don't want it to do is backfire on you, because I know a lot of people are doing it right now based on what another guru said they should do, based on how the person looks. If you base everything based on how an individual looks, there are disastrous consequences. Because if you are a large muscular individual, the likelihood, and you're eating this specific diet, and you're not watching all of your markers, all these different things, the likelihood you live into your 80s and 90s, it's not great. It's just not. And so that's why I want to share it with you. Again, you can get in great shape. You should exercise. You should move your body. But you have to look at the overall picture. So again, get in great shape. Feel great about yourself. Feel great about your physique. Do all those things. Eat good nutrition. But you don't need to push it so far in one direction that it then becomes unhealthy. And I just don't want it to catch up with you in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, which is when you see the symptoms. Alzheimer's begins to be created 20, 30 years, even 40 years before it actually gets diagnosed as Alzheimer's. Same with heart disease, same with all of these different issues that we have in our culture and society. So again, a little bit of a rant today. I just wanted to really get that off my chest, share with you that we are not living the same life as people 100 years ago. People aren't doing physical labor. They're not even eating the same animals that they were today. The soil's different. The fat composition is different. Everything is different. And also, it wasn't to the level of availability we have now. For your grandparents or great-grandparents to eat a massive steak every single day in addition to everything else. Again, unless they were very wealthy, they literally and most likely did not have the access to that. People were not 20, 30 plus pounds over their ideal weight 100, 150 years ago. So I just want to share these things with you just so that when you see information online, you can at least filter it through a lens of, is this actually true? Are the longest lived people anywhere in the world actually following this? Because a lot of people point to specific tribes all over the world. Again, these people die in their mid-60s. You don't want to emulate that. So at some point, when you get out of your 20s and maybe even mid-30s, it needs to be more about overall health and longevity, not just body transformation. You can have both. That's the nice thing. You can do both. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to link up today at episode 2510, how to have the best of all worlds. All right. So thank you for allowing me to go on this rant. It's not going to happen often, but every once in a while it has to, because, the more is better based mentality is not a good thing, and it's never going to get you to your goals in the long run. I just want to make sure you live a long and happy and healthy life. All right. Ayubowen, everybody. Take care. And again, StephenCabral.com/2510 for all the additional details.